Hey guys, it's Chris and welcome back to another Game of Thrones Season 8 video. And today I want to do a short little video on something that I've discussed actually for many years on Sunday live streams, etc. And that is why the Night King has to be a Stark. And is he a character we know, or at least heard of, in the world of Ice and Fire? But first, let me thank my newest Patreons. Thank you so much to Amanda Michelle. Thank you to Anonymous. Thank you to Lady Michelle as well. Thank you to Lisa Phillips for becoming an executive producer. And thank you as well to Sneaky McCheese. Really appreciate it, guys. Really appreciate your support. You guys keep this channel going through the long night. Alright, so the main reason I believe that the Night King in the show has to be a Stark is because of symmetry. Now, of course, you don't have to have perfect symmetry in any story, but it does seem to help. And the symmetry I'm talking about, of course, is that Dany represents fire in this whole metaphorical balance of ice and fire motif we have going on here. The Night King represents ice, and of course Jon Snow represents both. He is obviously linked to Dany via blood, being her nephew, so therefore, for symmetry's sake, he should be linked to the Night King by blood as well, or at least to the human that was turned to the Night King. Now, there have been many great videos out there on who the Night King potentially is, but some of these would not make sense for one reason: cause and effect. Even though history is likely skewed and likely different from what we are told due to unreliable narrators and even the bias and non-belief of the maesters or the septons, specifically the Andals who wrote history, there still has to be a White Walker threat before there was a wall. Even Sam tells Jon in A Feast for Crows, quote, "The oldest histories we have were written by the Andals that came to Westeros. The first men only left us runes on rocks, so everything we know about the Age of Heroes and the Dawn Age and the Long Night comes from the accounts set down by septons thousands of years later. There are archmaesters in the Citadel who question all of it. These old histories are full of kings who reigned for 100 years and knights riding around 1,000 years before there were knights." So specifically, Sam is telling Jon here that there are a lot of inconsistencies in the written histories, knights riding around before there were even knights, etc. So that tells us straight off the bat that history is definitely wrong, but even if the histories are wrong and incorrect as far as number of years, etc., there still has to be a certain order for certain events to happen to make up a natural chronological order. So for an example, we have the Night's King tale, which is the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He cannot be the same person as the Night King in the show, although again the show used a little twist on his name from the books, because if that were the case, the wall would have to be created before there was a threat from the north and a reason to form the Night's Watch and build the wall in the first place. Pick any character from the Age of Heroes, Bran the Builder, the Grey King, Simon Starrise. There are a lot of great theories on the Night King being many characters from history we've heard about during that era, but again, this era, according to history, was the era after the pact between the First Men and Children of the Forest that actually ended the war. So the children had already created the Night King before the pact, otherwise they would have easily won the war against men and there would be no pact. So in other words, if they had created the Night King and he had functioned properly and did what they told him to do, they would have never agreed to meet on the Isle of Faces because they would have already won the war in a fairly short amount of time. So the White Walkers and the First Long Night came after the pact at the Isle of Faces. And then we have the last hero, or Azor Ahai, and some of these other heroic figures that came into the picture supposedly to defeat the Night King and the White Walkers and drive them back up north. The last hero apparently sought out the Children of the Forest and their magic, but the Azor Ahai figure seemed to have some magical sword referred to as Lightbringer that we call Valyrian Steel or Dragon Steel. In the books, there is a fictional book called the Jade Compendium that tells us that he stabbed a creature with it and it burst into flames, and that sounds like Valyrian Steel to me. Of course, prophecy from Essos says he or she shall be born again, which seems to be the current timeline in our story, but history seems definitely skewed because the rise of Valyria was supposedly thousands of years after the Long Night and the Andal invasion. And Valyrians, of course, found dragons and used fire and blood to create Valyrian Steel, or Dragon Steel as Sam calls it, in the first place. So you can't have a guy running around using a magical flaming sword, which we of course think is Valyrian Steel, before the rise of Valyria, where they learned to create Valyrian Steel. Either way, history is definitely incorrect. The Andals who started writing history were of a new religion that didn't believe in all these magical things, and of course they brought the faith of the Seven with them. But even so, there has to be a particular order of things happening. There has to be a threat before any of these known characters in history were called into action to save the world. Otherwise, you would have to believe the wall was built before there was a long night and a threat from the north, or that the children created a second Night King after the peace agreement was made on the Isle of Faces, which of course would imply that the first Night King died instead of being driven back, and that the children were in some way still trying to wipe out all of mankind after the pact signed at the Isle of Faces, which doesn't seem to fit with our current narrative. So if it is true that Brandon the Builder founded House Stark, as we're told in the histories, the Night King has to be what we call a Proto-Stark. Now, of course, we've talked about this for many years over live streams, etc. It's actually became kind of a hashtag and drinking game on Sunday nights. But if Bran the Builder was the first Stark and founded that house, built Winterfell, etc., he was already reacting to an existing threat, built a wall, and then of course the Night's Watch was formed. So perhaps we have been misled, and we likely have. Perhaps House Stark was formed before Bran the Builder, and the earlier Starks knew what winter is coming really meant after one of their own were captured and tied to a weirwood tree where a piece of dragon glass was pushed into his chest, creating the Night King. So I do have one particular candidate that could actually fit all this, be kind of a known character, and still fit in the proper order of things to happen, regardless if the history is off by many thousands of years. In some tales, Brandon of the Bloody Blade was the son of Garth Greenhand and the father of Bran the Builder. Now, Brandon of the Bloody Blade was credited for warring against the children of the forest and killing so many at a place called Blue Lake that it became known as Red Lake. So perhaps Brandon of the Bloody Blade founded House Stark, being Bran the Builder's father, and the truth was simply hidden. So maybe Brandon Stark, the father of Bran the Builder, was captured and tied to that tree to be cursed to become some tool for the very thing he was fighting to destroy. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think there is a particular historical figure that is the Night King, or was it in fact just some no-name first man Proto-Stark, so to speak, who was strapped to that tree and turned to the Night King to turn men's numbers against them? Anyway, as usual, thank you for all the support, especially to you guys on Patreon, and a huge shout out to my executive Patreon SmokeScreen producers. And if you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like, comment, and a share, and be sure to subscribe to get everything, and click that notification bell so you're notified when I drop a new video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.